Carlos Medina, pronouns manager at San Diego Grantmakers. And I'd like to welcome you to our Summer Corporate Philanthropy webinar. Today we'll learn about the San Diego volunteers, and our featured speakers include Alicia Quinn, Vice President of New Business Development at San Diego County, and also Crystal Troll, Interim Executive Director at HandsOn San Diego. And they'll guide our conversation on how the Volunteer Hub can help with developing meaningful engagement opportunities in volunteer projects. Now, before we get started, I'm going to ask my colleague Melissa if you can go ahead and share the screen for us, please. Wonderful. And then we'll go to the second slide just to review a few housekeeping elements for today's webinar. So just to get started, as I mentioned before, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box located on the bottom of the screen. And I also want to note that at the end of the session, we'll have a few minutes with an evaluation poll for you to please complete. And that data we do use at San Diego Grantmakers to continually improve our programs. So we do appreciate taking a few minutes at the end of the session to complete that poll. I also wanted to note that this session will be recorded. Forgot to add that to this PowerPoint, but just to have these recording the session for later. And then for the introductions, we are anticipating a full today. And so I'm going to ask if folks can please share with us via chat box introduction. Please share your name, your organization, and what to learn from today or any questions that you have. And that's really important for us because we want this to be a conversation. We want this to be an opportunity for our speakers to tailor their information. So I do appreciate the time of folks. I see a lot of colleagues on the call. Sarah, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Also, Mark, I know we had a chance to connect via email, so looking forward to hearing your thoughts on things you're learning today. And with that said, I just want to introduce a colleague and a friend, Relations Manager at Nordson Corporation Foundation, and also board member at San Diego Grantmakers, who will share a little bit about our corporate philanthropy webinar series. Sarah, feel free to take it away.
Great, thanks, Carlos. I'm going to apologize in advance if my dog starts barking. Of course, the gardener's here right now, so she'll definitely bark. So welcome to our corporate philanthropy series. San Diego Grantmakers' mission is to connect and activate funders to learn, lead, and invest in our community. And I know that's why you're all here today. The corporate series is specifically for folks working in corporate philanthropy. You know, a lot of us work in silos or we're onesies or twosies at our organizations, and it's really important for us to be able to connect with each other and have, you know, a support network to bounce ideas off of. And Grantmakers has provided such a great platform for us to really be able to do that. So we're here to learn best practices together so we can invest in our communities and really work to make our communities more equitable spaces. So thank you all for joining. Nordson's very proud to sponsor this series now for the second year. And thank you to Grantmakers for always putting on great programs for us. So welcome, and I'm glad you're all here. And we look forward to the presentation today. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. And without much further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers. As I mentioned before, Alicia Quinn from United Way of San Diego County and Crystal Troll from HandsOn San Diego. Their bios are on our event page, and you can definitely read more there. But we're gonna go ahead and dive right into the content because we've had a lot of conversations about this. We're all very enthusiastic, and we want to make sure we provide enough robust time for Q&A at the end. So just a friendly reminder that at the end we will have a poll. If you can please respond to that, which will help us to evaluate and improve our programs. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Crystal to start, if that's okay.
You're on mute, Crystal.
Rookie mistake, sorry about that. So my name is Crystal Troll. I'm the Interim Executive Director for HandsOn San Diego. I'm delighted to be here, especially to be presenting with Alicia. We've just had so much fun over the past few months, just really working together and collaborating in its truest sense to ensure that our community groups and our nonprofit partners are really helping to meet the needs of our community even now, especially during COVID. So we have a lot to talk about, but I know that we have a slide deck too, so if we can get that loaded. We'd like to have get a little sense of kind of what you were hoping to get out of this time with us. So if you could put in the chat box your name, your company, and then you know, what you hope to learn from today, and maybe some questions that you have so that we can be thinking of those when we get to that part. So we can put to the first slide, which is that kind of to-do slide. So there, for those of you who are visual, here's a visual instruction. So I'm going to turn it over to Alicia. She's going to start us off, and I think we can go to our next slide.
Great, thanks so much, Crystal. And thank you to Sarah for that introduction, and to San Diego Grantmakers for the invitation to participate today. Like Crystal said, we are really excited to share some of the work that we've been doing. And I always love spending time with the members of San Diego Grantmakers. So without further ado, we'll kind of jump into the content. And I just wanted to kind of set the stage and framework. I know that we, lots of times we'll talk about different terms and buzzwords. And so when I talk about corporate social responsibility, we all know that the definition of CSR really can be quite broad. It can include corporate philanthropy, it can include employee engagement and volunteerism, sustainable and ethical business practices, advocacy around social and environmental issues. For the purpose of today's conversation, we are going to focus primarily on employee engagement and volunteerism. So when we think about the return on the investment of CSR from a business or corporate standpoint, there's a few different pretty evident ones that I'm sure many of you can attest to, given the work that you're doing with our local businesses. Having a strong CSR program often can help a company recruit and retain and develop talent, and also increase productivity. 66% of female MBAs and 59% of male MBAs plan to put having a social or a positive impact on society ahead of financial gains. Forbes actually just came out with a study within the last year saying that more than 90% of MBA graduates would forego a higher salary in order to work for a company that has a social ethos that is aligned with their own. Also, in addition to the benefits that it can have on organizational development and human capital, there's also brand equity that can be delivered when a company has a strong CSR program and cause marketing benefits of that nature. Melissa, if you'll just click to the next slide. On sort of a personal level, when we think about benefits, there's a lot of data out there that shows that volunteering, when individuals volunteer, they can have improved physical, mental, and emotional health, reduced stress, and further engagement. And I think that all of those things are top of mind and top of conversation, especially right now as you know our world and our communities are experiencing a pandemic, and you know the health and economic ramifications that this pandemic is delivering really offers, I think, an opportunity from a corporate side for companies to think about ways in which they can engage their employees to help them deal with what's going on in our community. Melissa, if you wouldn't mind going to the next. Yep, thank you. So we've been seeing a number of trends in the CSR world amid COVID. This list is certainly not exhaustive, but there are COVID relief efforts that are being made on the part of businesses across the country and internationally. Here in San Diego, with the San Diego County COVID Response Fund that was launched in partnership with San Diego Foundation, SDG&E, the County of San Diego, the Labor Council, and United Way. We saw a tremendous amount of generosity among local companies. We also found in the USD's Nonprofit Institute report, if you haven't read that already, I'll put a link in the chat box. It's definitely worth a read. It found that nonprofits were reporting that Many of them had funders who were revising grant terms in consideration of COVID and what was going on. There's been a lot of employee engagement and volunteer opportunities, which we will talk about when we start kind of getting into the volunteer hub. But lots of opportunities for volunteerism, both in person as well as virtually. I think that being able to leverage technology has really made virtual volunteerism a great opportunity for companies to engage their employees, not just in giving back to the community, but in giving, getting connected and staying connected with one another. We had at United Way a couple of weeks ago, Hunter Industries, they put together some hygiene kits for program beneficiaries of elder help. They came to United Way and picked up the supplies and then went home and engaged their families and coworkers in building those hygiene kits. We had another local business called RevCult last week pick up a bunch of school supplies, and they are currently stuffing more than 100 backpacks for students that are in our Readers in the Heights program. And then there's also some safe and fun and accessible opportunities, such as the Labor Council's weekly food drives, our Emerging Leaders team, which is comprised of a number of corporate partners, employees. They had a social distancing food drive and were able to feed more than 1,000 families on a recent Saturday. Let's go to the next one, please. Crystal, do you want to take over from here?
Hey, yeah, great. So in terms of, not from the nonprofit partner perspective, there are traditional needs that nonprofits have always had. When we think about volunteering and ways that corporations and businesses can be involved. So, there's always the monetary donations, there are in-kind donations, all kinds of need for, the volunteer workforce for events and special projects, beautification projects, races, walks, galas, that kind of thing, as well as, the board and committee members and the skills-based volunteering that nonprofits need. So, it's really about the time, the talent, and the treasure, the age-old saying. And some of those things still remain in the virtual environment. Some of those things are still needed. However, we're in a moment right now in time where we can really come up with some new ways to meet the needs in the virtual space. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I want you to keep these in mind because these are still needs for the nonprofits. They can go to the next slide, please. So, traditionally there are barriers for volunteers. There are a lot of volunteers, a lot of organizations, a lot of ways to give back. And sometimes this process dilutes the impact because you can't find the right nonprofit to connect to, nobody returns your call, or maybe schedules change, logistics become an issue. So that's a real barrier for volunteers. Go to the next slide. One of the barriers for nonprofits is attracting volunteer support if you're a smaller nonprofit. Usually when people think about volunteer, they think about the food bank, or they think about the hospital or some larger entity. So they tend to kind of get all the airtime. So it creates additional barriers for the nonprofits. We'll go to the next slide. So for HandsOn, we connect the two. We really, I guess would say we are the experts in terms of connecting volunteers to nonprofits to generate and maximize community impact. Our mission is to strengthen communities through volunteer action. And we believe that when individuals are actively engaged, communities are stronger. And so because of this connection and because of this work, we've identified some ways to work with United Way of San Diego to just really collaborate and partner and to bring both of our expertise areas to the table to make it easier for volunteers to volunteer, make an impact, as well as easier for nonprofits to get the word out and to have their missions, the capacity, reach even more capacity. So I'm going to let Alicia talk a little bit about what United Way is doing, and then we will talk about some of the COVID challenges. Next slide.
Thank you. So as many of you know, United Way of San Diego County, we work primarily on the community impact side in the education and family stability space. We The majority of our revenue has come from workplace campaigns. We have more than 300 corporate partners here in San Diego whose employees generously donate a portion of their paycheck to or through the United Way to their favorite charity through our workplace giving. In recent years, we have started to build out a corporate social responsibility department that goes beyond or complements the workplace giving, because, and I know that I'm preaching to the choir right now, people want to give back in different ways, in ways that go beyond writing a check. And companies really have a great opportunity to engage their employees in giving back to the community that can go beyond just a financial contribution. And so ways in which United Way is supporting our corporate partners, both existing and new, we're always looking for new partners, is to provide services around CSR strategy, both from, you know, a corporate CSR philanthropy strategy as well as employee engagement. We'll continue to do our Day of Service projects, which I just mentioned, both in person as well as virtual, with an extra focus on virtual these days. We also have a nonprofit board service training and matching program that we recently partnered with the Nonprofit Institute at USD to launch. We had our first cohort go through the program in February, and this afternoon we will be sending out an announcement for our next cohort, which will be virtually. It'll be a 6-week program starting on September 30th, and will really provide an opportunity for people who are interested in serving on boards or currently serve on boards to learn how they can give and get the most value out of nonprofit board service, and then we'll help to be that little matchmaker to connect them with nonprofits that have needs for specific subject areas of expertise. And then skills-based volunteerism is something that we are also kind of diving into, and COVID has sort of put this to the front of our strategy, and we'll tell you why if we go to the next slide, please, Melissa. Thank you. So USD, in that report that we mentioned before, they asked nonprofits, you know, what are the needs that you are having most as a result of COVID? And here's what their examples were, so their responses. Obviously, lots of nonprofits are having to revise and revamp their fundraising strategies. Many nonprofits rely very heavily on fee-for-service, so programs and revenue-generating products and services that due to COVID and stay-at-home orders and the shutdown just came to a screeching halt. And so a lot of them have to really be, you know, revamping those fundraising strategies. Helping their board of directors, you know, learn how to best support the nonprofit, their nonprofits during this time. They are finding that there's a lot of employment issues, so they need human resources support, and many organizations don't have that talent or business acumen on staff. Same goes with financial scenario planning, and you can see some of the others here. Next slide, please.
So, so corporate challenges, you know, for COVID, because of COVID. You know, in our work at HandsOn, we work with hundreds of nonprofits and many corporate partners and thousands of volunteers in the community. But we're finding, you know, because of COVID, corporations, when we do our corporate projects, they're not really sure what to do now that everything is virtual. You know, we've had huge successes in large corporate events where, you know, lots of employees get together and they will beautify an area of a community, or they'll build something together. But because of the restrictions that, being in person, it's what do we do now? And with COVID, we've seen, you know, budgets impacted seriously in terms of being frozen altogether or significantly decreased, but yet there's still a strong desire for employees to be engaged. They want to connect with one another. They still want to make an impact on their community. So there's these questions of what can we do? How do we do this work from the volunteer side, from the nonprofit side, and from the corporate side? And so United Way of San Diego and HandsOn kind of came together and said, what can we do together to help this? Let's go to the next slide. So we created this volunteer hub, this COVID-19 volunteer hub, and really it was intended to be a one-stop shop. because as with any disaster or emergency, you have a lot of people who want to help. But without a coordinated effort, sometimes the help either is not used as much as it could be, or it gets diluted. So the Volunteer Hub is really intended to be that place where volunteer opportunities could be posted. Volunteers could sign up through the HandsOn San Diego Volunteer Connect platform, and corporations can come to look at ideas for virtual volunteering and connect with local volunteers and local nonprofits, as well as engage their employees in giving back. So through this process, we've identified lots of ways that people can still be engaged, whether from an employee perspective or a community perspective. Of course, going back to that time, talent, and treasure, you know, there's always the monetary donations, which are helpful. They're not always the most needed, but they do help. And there still are some in-person volunteer opportunities in terms of food distribution, direct service to clients, direct services to clients, donating blood. But the virtual volunteer is really where we're finding these new opportunities. There are opportunities for people to read books virtually, to do little story times, making phone calls to seniors or folks who can't get out because their health is compromised, writing cards and sending them to people who are lacking human contact. We know that a lot of skilled nursing facilities, those residents are pretty much, you know, they don't get visitors from the outside, and they can't leave. So letting them know that they're still cared for, putting kits together, STEM-based kits for students, prepping the hygiene boxes, as Alicia was mentioning. And this skills-based volunteering is really an area that I think has a lot of opportunity moving forward. We have you know, people from companies who have these skills and who are finding that they have a little bit of time now that they're not commuting back and forth, maybe to give back in a way that they didn't feel was logistically possible before. So we're trying to really make sure that there's opportunities for that. But like I said earlier, you know, we're at a moment in time here where we really have the opportunity to reframe what it means to impact our community from the corporate perspective, in terms of what do our, you know, we'll go to the next slide. What are the needs of our employees? You know, what do they want to do? How do we see ourselves as a company really giving back? Is it the same that we've always done, or do we find that we need to pivot and shift? You know, so Alicia and I wanted to spend some time asking the participants in this call, this webinar, you know, what are you learning? So we can have a discussion together. How can we learn from each other? Where are the shifts happening in terms of what your needs are? What are your employees' expectations? And how does that impact the community? So we wanted to open it up for questions. Alicia, there was more that you wanted to say?
No, I think you covered it all. One thing that I was just going to note is that that recent report from USD did find that 57% of nonprofit respondents have had to lay off or furlough workers. And so that need for capacity is real. That need for, you know, for helping to stuff the backpacks or read to children, as well as, you know, help develop a marketing strategy and brainstorm ways in which they can maintain, you know, their sustainability and scalability of their organization. So yeah, we would love to hear from all of you, you know, what you're finding, what you're looking for. And this is this Volunteer Hub is a project and initiative that I think, like everything in life right now, is constantly changing and evolving. And so we want to make sure that we have a solution that is there for both the nonprofit community as well as the corporate community.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Alicia and Crystal. And we had some folks provide us some content they're interested in learning about and some questions. And I went ahead and sent that to you via the chat. And so we can start.
That's great.
And I would also encourage folks, as the conversation is continuing, please feel free to include more questions or content that you'd like to review during today's webinar. And so why don't I go ahead and I'll start reading them out, if that's all right. And then I will ask folks, if you feel comfortable, you're welcome to step off mute and to join us in this conversation. So I will invite, if Mark Eddington is interested in speaking really quickly about what he's hoping to learn more about volunteer options. Oh, actually, thank you, Mark, for chiming in. I'm going to go ahead and read what Mark has here. Volunteers' requests to us at Mission Edge are plentiful, but in our efforts to search for virtual volunteering, oh, Mark, feel free to take it away.
Oh, I was trying to use the chat box and be smart about this, but we have, thanks, Carlos. Thank you very much. And thank you, Crystal and Alicia, both. Excellent, and really glad to know the partnerships that you all have jumped into. Hello. The discussion kickoff, if you will, for me has been, we've learned in a variety of ways as Mission Edge is a nonprofit that also centers ourselves within helping other nonprofits as we do outsourced HR, we do outsourced finance and accounting. And we partner with Qualcomm in a beautiful partnership in trying to assist their employees in getting into the community and helping out as well. And we've had lots of requests, just overwhelming number of requests for volunteering. When we made efforts to seek out nonprofits about what opportunities there were for virtual, they were kind of like deer in headlights to understand what they could offer, knowing that people were still trying to help in the best of intentions. But basically we were told, come back to us. Mm-hmm. What are you both finding now? Where are we in this hopefully escalating growth and education of virtual volunteer connectivity?
Mm-hmm. I can start off and then Crystal, feel free to jump in. And Mark, it's so nice to meet you. I used to work at Mission Edge and I've heard great things about you. So nice terrific. To be connected.
Great. It's wonderful to meet you. Thanks, Alicia.
Yeah. So, I think that that deer in headlights feeling, many, I can speak on behalf of nonprofits, many of us were feeling when COVID first hit. We did not really, not United Way, but many nonprofits really did not know sort of what the next couple of months looked like for them. And this statistic is old, but one of the USD's State of the Nonprofits a couple of years ago said that, the majority of smaller organizations in San Diego County only have about 2 months of cash flow. And so when, COVID hit and everybody had to go work from home and programs halted and fee-for-service programs for nonprofits stopped having that income, nonprofits, many of them were really, freaking out and had those deer in headlights. And I think that, most nonprofit leaders were just trying to figure out how to make the next payroll and how to keep the lights on and how to really be able to respond to the beneficiaries of their services, especially those in, the health and human services space, or those working with the senior population or working in underserved communities that were really hit hard by COVID, both from the health standpoint as well as the economic standpoint. These nonprofits had a tremendous stress on them from both a financial as well as a service and program delivery standpoint. I think that stress is still there and that stress is still very real. I also think that many of our organizations are starting to realize that whatever this is our new normal and we're in it for the long run. And we need to figure out how are we going to, be able to sustain and scale our operations so that we can respond to the needs in the community that are just increasing at such a rapid rate. And so from the conversations that I've had, I would say that, the majority of nonprofits are wanting and needing that help and are more open to being able to take that in. And one of the reasons why, we set up the Volunteer Hub was that, as Crystal mentioned, this could be a one-stop shop. And this can be, nonprofits can reach out to us and say, hey, I need help with a marketing plan or a fundraising plan. And the HandsOn and United Way team can help them create, what does that scope of work look like? What does that project scope look like? What types of skills and expertise do you need? And then we can tap into our relationships with the community, with the corporate community to find how we can match that supply and that demand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's excellent, Alicia. I would agree with all that. And also, I would offer that this is really a time that nonprofits as well as corporations are really stepping back and saying, okay, we really have to start thinking about the future. You know, we all think that, you know, strategic planning and goal setting and everything is kind of like out there, but I think nonprofits are really faced with, we really have to make sure that we're sustainable more intentionally than maybe they have been before. And so the deer in the headlights, I will say, you know, volunteering in general, you know, a lot of nonprofit organizations, they don't have dedicated staff to manage all the volunteers. They don't have adequate capacity to develop their volunteer program. And so somebody like HandsOn San Diego and United Way can come in and help them kind of develop, what does that look like to build a volunteer program in partnership with the local corporations who can help with that work as well. So, so I think that it's like the silver lining, you know, in the gray cloud. It's giving us an opportunity to really reframe how we're doing our work so that we're working smarter, not harder, and really maximizing the collaborations and resources that are out there.
Are you both seeing, if I may ask, a better grasping by the nonprofits of creating virtual volunteer opportunities, or are they still in the formulation stages? Recognizing, like you're saying, strategizing now about, okay, this was not a temporary, hey, okay, August, we're going to be able to jump back to the way we used to do things. Let's get ready for our big annual gala in December, type idea. But now it's much more fully realistically shifted.
I'd say from a skills-based and capacity building types of volunteerism, that's still sort of in formulation. I think that nonprofits are still trying to figure out how to mobilize that assistance, knowing that they have that need. We are seeing from a number of nonprofits who have more of donation needs, that they're being much more vocal and coming out and telling us what they need. Elder Help, for example, you know, we received a grant from a partner and said we can put X amount of dollars towards buying supplies. What do your program participants need? And they said, you know, we are dropping off food to senior citizens who are homebound and really can't get out during COVID, and they don't have basic like hygiene products. They need deodorant and they need toothpaste and toothbrushes. And so what we were able to do was we were able to go order all those supplies, and the generous volunteers of Hunter Industries picked up those supplies and they packed them into little kits and bags, and they wrote little words and notes of encouragement, brought them back to Elder Help, and then the Elder Help staff was able to drop them off at the home. So being creative in that way, I would say nonprofits have been sort of jumping on the gun a lot quicker with those types of.
I'm going to back off and let others ask questions, please.
I do want to say, though, some organizations have been quicker to respond to the virtual environment, and I think that's just within their kind of culture anyway. They're innovative, they pivot quickly. You know, some of the areas that are still going to struggle are those that provide the direct services, especially when there's HIPAA or any type of privacy issues involved, children. You know, so they're going to be a little bit slower in developing some of that virtual kind of engagement just to keep their clients and constituents safe. So,
thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
There are a couple questions that I'm going to combine, if it's all right. I'll pose them to you, Crystal, and then we can ask Alicia. But the goal is to not burden nonprofits by creating virtual volunteer opportunities. And so, you know, what are strategies to make sure that it's a marriage of equals and both people benefit equally?
Yeah. So yeah, there are some nonprofits that just won't have anything to offer virtually, and that's okay. As long as that is something that they've decided that, you know, is not going to move their mission. But just creating a virtual opportunity just to say you have one is not a good way to go. So we really work with, so Jessie Kay, she's our volunteer engagement manager. She really works with nonprofits to kind of come up with ideas and to think, how would this work logistically, knowing what they're going to get into in terms of the expectations, the deliverables, to make sure it really makes sense. So it isn't the burden. We don't really want it to be something that causes extra stress. We do want it to be that win-win. And it's not the same for every organization. We have kind of basic ideas, and then we tailor them to make sure that they work with the organization based on the number of employees, based on the number of volunteers, based on the number of, you know, expected kind of outcomes. So So it really is a creative process. But at the end of the day, if it's not going to work, then it just doesn't work.
Yeah, and I would say a lot of a lot of nonprofits are also finding that their volunteers, some of their volunteers are maybe not able to volunteer anymore virtually because of something that's going on at home, or things have changed. And so lots of organizations, Junior Achievement, for example, they've relied on volunteers for years to come into their building in Mission Valley and tutor the kids after school, and all of that is moving virtually. And so I think that it's actually an opportunity for community members who may not have known about these organizations before to get connected. And I think that that's a wonderful opportunity for nonprofits as well. And we do a lot of this, not educating, but trying to reinforce the benefits of engaging volunteers from a nonprofit perspective, because all the research shows that if you engage somebody as a volunteer, chances are that person's going to become a donor.
Agreed. Thank you. And one question I had personally is, I believe it was Crystal had referenced that there are smaller nonprofits, obviously scaling in size, that you work with, but I'd be curious about your approaches of working with those smaller nonprofits that may not have traditional pathways to connecting with volunteers or resources like that.
So it really comes back to, it all comes down to, what are you trying to accomplish? What part of your mission will volunteer support actually help move the needle on? And so once that's identified, we can start from there and say, okay, so if your mission, let's say, is to alleviate hunger. Okay, so, we can start with that. How are you doing your work? And then how would that look like to do that virtually? We have many small food pantries in the county. I think there are over 200 small food pantries in the county. They're not as big as San Diego Food Bank or Feeding San Diego, but they still are doing the work. So it's about identifying how, as a small organization, we can come in and support that. So HandsOn has a whole platform that engages volunteers. You sign up for an account, you're able to sign up for shifts, you can work, it's a very seamless operation. So we make it easy for those food pantries. They tell us how many shifts they have. We put them on the website, volunteers sign up for them, and they show up in person or whatever the virtual opportunity is, that shift is filled. So, so for the smaller organizations, something like that is very helpful because it alleviates the burden from them to have to deal with the logistics, making sure volunteers show up, communicating to them. So in a way, that's how we can really offer that kind of expertise in connecting the volunteers, working with them. And on the other side, we have tools and resources to help them create a robust volunteer engagement program. What does that look like for your small nonprofit, medium-sized nonprofit, large nonprofit to have a volunteer engagement program? And then on the flip side, if we have outside groups like corporations and community groups who want to give back, how do they fit into that picture so that everybody is really walking away with a sense of, this was a win-win?
That is excellent. And I'm going to go ahead and read some of the other questions that are coming through. Thank you, Naveen, for sharing with us. Employee engagement is decreased because employees can no longer volunteer in teams. Most volunteer opportunities are individual. So how can we approach that to increase volunteerism?
So I've seen, I mentioned the backpack supplies. I think that that's a great creative way for employees to engage with one another using Zoom. Last year, I see Jennifer Love Bruce on here. Last year, we had that same volunteer event, on site, where the employees came downstairs during their lunch break and were able to engage with each other while they were stuffing backpacks and writing words of encouragement. It was a really great engagement opportunity, not just the impact that was being made in the community to the children that we were serving, but to those employees. we were able to sort of recreate that experience virtually this year with a company called RevCult, where the employees came and they came in their own cars and they picked up the supplies. You know, we were all wearing our masks and gloves and everything, and we made sure to put hand sanitizer in each of the bags. And then they went home to their respective homes. But many of them got onto Zoom and did like a Zoom happy hour, and they had happy hour and stuffed the backpacks together. And then this week, they're dropping the backpacks off again individually at United Way, and we'll deliver them to the children. But I think using, leveraging technology or ways that we can stay connected to each other as employees is so important, and having this added component of being able to do something that is really impacting, the lives of children who are in great need this summer. I think that that's a great example. We're happy to help orchestrate that.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. All right, I have another question I want to pose to the speakers is, earlier we had mentioned dedicated days of service, and some companies are moving away from workplace giving campaigns to acts of kindness. I'm just curious, any successes that you've seen to keep folks engaged throughout the year?
Yeah, I again, I think that's sort of this shift away from or expanding beyond workplace giving and writing a check to or through United Way. I think that this idea of being more engaged, even pre-COVID, when it wasn't just virtual, but people want to give back in different ways. And I think that having those types of day of service events where employees can, get together and get to know a nonprofit and do something for that organization is great. I think that long-term engagement is really important. And so I actually, I sort of put the onus on the nonprofit to steward the volunteers that they are that they have on site and helping them. I think, and then also, looking at other ways in which they can engage those volunteers that goes beyond that day of service project. Like I said, we have, a board service program, helping to, get people on advisory boards or having them be more engaged. Obviously, donation is always a lovely benefit of having, a volunteer turn into a donor, but there are other ways that go beyond just that one day of service project that you can keep somebody engaged with your mission.
Mm-hmm. Also, too, I would add, it's about also giving the employees the resources to be able to volunteer outside of maybe a company event or an employee engagement event, so that volunteering becomes a way of life for them. So really allowing them access to ongoing opportunities so that they can do with their family. So there are lots of ways to keep employees giving back to their community outside of official employee giving back events. So that's where someplace like HandsOn or the Hub really provides that, because it's a whole list of opportunities that folks can do on their own.
Thank you. And another question I have that might benefit some of the folks on the call is, you had mentioned earlier about skills-based volunteer opportunities, and I'm sure some companies might have departments with certain specialties, and I'm curious what are some strategies to help connect those folks with your skills-based volunteer opportunities?
Yeah, we are at the Volunteer Hub in the United Way. We are happy to be that matchmaker. Our hope is to continue sourcing those capacity needs from the nonprofits, being able to not just post them on the Volunteer Hub, but also be more proactive and reach out to corporate partners who we know have employees with skilled expertise in those areas. I think also thinking about some of the operational or the skills and expertise that you have on staff at your company and how those things translate to the nonprofit sector. And sometimes that's just a vocabulary thing, but a business development person or somebody on the sales team can be immensely beneficial to a fundraising need that a nonprofit may have. I think that there's ways in which you can connect those skills and expertise that may not seem totally obvious at first. And United Way and HandsOn, we know both those supply and demand pieces, and so we're happy to be the match. I know I said matchmaker like 3 times, but happy to be that connector and that convener to make that match. So I'm happy to share my email in here, and please reach out if you want to discuss further.
Yeah, and I think technology support is one of those skills-based ways that folks who have that particular skill set can really help nonprofits with their websites, their internal IT systems, managing all of their intellectual technology and the systems and processes, especially for those smaller to medium-sized nonprofits that don't necessarily have budgets to hire outside IT consultants. That's a great way also to provide this professional skill.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And when you were talking earlier, Alicia, especially about how business planning expertise can help with fundraising, and you also mentioned in the slides that the need for fundraising is a huge volunteer need among nonprofits. And I'm just curious, what are other strategies that can be beneficial to nonprofits as they look for alternative forms of support?
You mean like beyond fundraising support, or?
There's definitely help with the development of strategy, which a person with sales expertise can help with, but even just implementation, peer-to-peer, what are some suggestions that you've seen successful?
Yeah, I think that, for United Way, for example, we were planning to have a 600-person virtual gala this October, or in-person gala on Broadway Pier this October, and that's moved virtually. And I can speak from experience that we have tremendous need for technological expertise, and figuring out how do we even start to move this event virtually. So that's been something that we have been able to engage a group of volunteers who have that technical expertise, who can inform us how to shift our fundraising event from in-person to virtual. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
I would also offer that for corporations who have the marketing departments, the technology departments, offering their staff to support nonprofits to do these virtual fundraising events, to figure out the logistics, and also to just word of mouth. As a former fundraiser myself, recovering fundraiser, the word of mouth is so powerful. And really, oftentimes I find that one of the biggest gaps that we find in employee engagement in the community is after they do their project, they go back to their companies, and then there's never any follow-up, or there's never any after engagement. So I feel like there's real opportunities for employees to stay engaged. If they did a project and they felt so inspired and they really gave back, to connect, to still stay connected with that organization, because that employee could be a potential fundraiser, a potential board member, a potential committee member. So it's really keeping the relationship alive beyond the project itself. And that's why I was hoping, to talk a little bit about in this session, like how to re-engage CSR and reframe it so that it goes beyond just that event. How can a corporation really make that long-term impact beyond the project? And I think the key is between the employees and the community, and keeping those relationships alive so that these needs can be met. And just the power of people sharing, people talking, people sharing their experience is just so helpful in terms of fundraising.
Agreed. And I'm going to pose one question before we do a final closeout, but I also want to make space if we have time for other folks. But as we're discussing this, and you're mentioning the value of having stewardship to keep employees engaged, or rather, to keep corporate employees engaged with nonprofits, what are ways virtually volunteering that corporate and volunteers can support nonprofits in their stewardship efforts?
Well, I think we've been talking about it, just in terms of offering professional skills, allowing time for employees to participate in something that will impact their community, really identifying too, what is it that, how is that win-win? How is that really possible? Really talking about that in terms of both sides, the needs being met. Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about ways to do that.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, like we said, we're happy as the Volunteer Hub to sort of broker those relationships. And I would also encourage, you know, our corporate partners who are funders to reach out to the nonprofits that you have relationships with and find out from them what their needs are. Nobody's ever going to say no to money. However, you know, I think having that honest, you know, conversation about what their, you know, resource and capacity needs truly are, will open some doors to other opportunities. But, you know, as Crystal and I have been saying, we are happy to help broker those conversations as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Crystal.
Thank you.
And we have budgeted a little time at the end, as I mentioned, for our evaluation poll. So unless any questions pop up soon, I'm going to ask my colleague, Melissa, if she can please share that poll with us. And just a friendly reminder to everyone, this data is very valuable to us at Grantmakers. We use this to improve our programs continually. And I just want to end by thanking first our sponsor, Nordson, for sponsoring the corporate webinar series. Thank you, Sarah, for the opening remarks. And to our speakers, Crystal Trull and also Alicia Quinn, representing HandsOn San Diego, respectively, and United Way of San Diego County, and our lovely conversation about the San Diego Volunteer Hub. I see that some contact information has been provided by our speakers in the chat box. Feel free to utilize that. We will also include that in the follow-up email we'll send to folks with a link to this recording. So,
and we really would love to hear from you.
Yes, yeah, and I think Alicia and I would agree that we cannot do this work in isolation. We have to really talk with each other and truly collaborate, which will be an important thing moving forward.
No, I have a question, Carlos, which is to everyone, as this is an excellent networking experience. So thank you both for cool sharing of all these experiences. Are we able to give permission for ourselves to offer each other communication, email addresses to each other, or what type of communication can we have with everyone who's been on the call?
Yeah, feel free, if you want to share your contact information with other folks on the call, feel free to share that with me, and I can distribute that in the follow-up email.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you.
More than welcome. And thank you all. I'm glad this is beneficial for everyone here, and rest assured we'll follow up with more information. If you have any questions, you can find more information at sdgrantmakers.org. Thank you all.
Great. Thank you.